This one's actually the real. Hey, Ernesto. Hi, how are you? Good, how you doing?
We would like to welcome everyone out to our city council meeting and would like to call this meeting to order. We would like to begin by a thought that keeps moving on the screen, but hopefully it's there. This thought is: you gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You're able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. Eleanor Roosevelt, submitted by Amanda Clough. We appreciate that. And we're going to have our Pledge of Allegiance by a bear group, and we have the name of Tegan Jensen, Colton Pranger, Winston Thompson, Colton Bevins, Colin Thompson, Michael Doyle as our Little Orem Patriots for reciting the Pledge of Allegiance from memory in front of the audience gathered for the Orem City Council meeting held on today, May the 9th, 2017. So if they could come forward to the podium, and we will go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance right over here. Then Bryn, yeah, you could pull that down.
Color guard attention. May the audience please take off any caps. Hand salute. Will the audience please repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. The audience may be seated.
So if you would like to stand there for a minute. Michael.
He's not here today.
Okay, you can hold Michael's phone. Colin? Okay. Colton? Bevins? Okay. Winston? Colton Pranger?
Not here.
Okay. Tegan? Okay. And if you want to come over here, we'll get a picture again real quick. Okay, 2 on one side and 2 on the other. Okay.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. We would now like to approve the minutes of City Council meeting held on April the 11th, 2017, and the minutes of the joint Orem Provo City Council meeting held on April the 13th, 2017. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we would like to make mention of upcoming events. On April 10th through May 27th, we're continuing our second annual spring cleanup from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at various locations. On May the 18th, we have the Tucano's Brazilian Grill ribbon cutting at 5 p.m. at University Place. On May the 20th, we have the Miss Orem Scholarship Program at the Cirrus Center at 7 p.m. for the pageant. On May the 20th at 9 a.m., we have the Dog Park ribbon cutting up at Timpanogos Park up the canyon. On May the 29th, we have our annual Memorial Day program at 9 a.m. at the cemetery. On June the 1st through the 7th, we have the filing period for the election of mayor and 3 city council seats. On June the 5th through the 10th, we have the City of Orem Summerfest. And on June the 17th, we have the Transportation Advisory Commission annual bike ride at 9 a.m. at Palisades Park. We have a couple of appointments to boards and commissions. The first one is to the Recreation Advisory Commission, Russell Bird. Russell, are you here? Okay, thank you. If you could, appreciate you standing up. Russell has served in municipal government. And he loves recreation. He's spent his career at the city of Palmdale, California, and has worked with the CDBG program before. So he would be appointed to that. And the second one is to the Arts Council of David Blankton. Is he here? Okay, and he's been involved in the arts most of his life. He's been involved with concerts and performances in Orem for 30 years. Is there a recommendation to appoint these 2 individuals?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We now would like to have a proclamation for Police Week. This is a proclamation whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the 85 devoutly dedicated members of the City of Orem Police Department, and whereas nearly 60,000 assaults against law enforcement officers are reported each year, resulting in approximately 16,000 injuries, and whereas since the first recorded death in 1791, more than 20,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and have been killed in the line of duty, the names of which are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., and whereas hundreds of new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring, including 144 officers killed in 2016, 3 of whom were from the state of Utah, and many officers killed in previous years. And whereas law enforcement officers are the guardians of life and property, defenders of the individual right to be free, warriors in the war against crime, and dedicated to the preservation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas May 15th of each year is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half-staff. Now, therefore, I, Richard F. Brunch, Jr., Mayor of the City of Orem, Utah, do hereby proclaim May 14th through 20th, 2017, as Police Week in the City of Orem and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation, and urge all citizens to do the same, dated this 9th day of May 2017. We have a second proclamation, and this is for the National Drinking Water Week. whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas our health, comfort, support for our economy, and quality of life depend on an abundant supply of safe, high-quality drinking water, and whereas any measure of a successful society, low mortality rates, economic growth and diversity, productivity, and public safety are in some way related to access to safe water, and whereas the problems and challenges of meeting future water supply needs are many and growing in complexity, and whereas we are all stewards of the water infrastructure upon which future generations depend, and whereas each citizen of our community is called upon to help protect our source waters from pollution, to practice wise water use, and to get involved in local water issues, and whereas the ever-increasing need for domestic water makes continued training of skilled personnel essential, now therefore I, Richard F. Brunts Jr., Mayor of the City of Orem, hereby proclaim May 7th through 13th, 2017 as National Drinking Water Week in the City of Orem, and ask all citizens to join in extending our appreciation to the dedicated men and women of the Orem Municipal Water System, and urge that Orem citizens participate in Natural Drinking Water Week activities and become more informed about Orem's water supply and system, dated this 9th day of May 2017. I would like to move that we accept both these proclamations. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. I would like to make mention that two of our council members are not with us this evening, Councilmember Tom McDonald and Councilmember Mark Seastrand, who are out of town. I also wanted to make mention that we have a mayor for the day today of a student at Orchard Elementary. His name is Preston White. And Preston, would you stand up? So Preston has been shadowing me all day long at all of our activities and has been a helpful assistant, and we appreciate having him here. He won this right at a carnival at his school, and we appreciate his being part of our city council this evening. Thank you, Preston. We now would like to go on to the personal appearances time of our city council meeting. Again, we would ask that you keep your remarks to 3 minutes and that you give us your name. We will start first of all with Scott Stevenson, after which we'll hear from Gary Tibbetts.
Good evening, Mayor, councilmen and women. Thank you very much for your service to our community. My name is Scott Stevenson. I live in the Lake Ridge neighborhood. I moved there 3 years ago in 2014. And like the neighborhood so well, did my due diligence. I have a home that borders Lake Ridge Junior High School, and thought, yeah, we ought to stay here. And bought the home in November, only to learn that just across the way that there's a PEG development on the east side of UVU that will completely, for selfish reasons, take away my partial view of Utah Lake, as well as take away the views I have of the western horizon. More important than that, though, in learning that this neighborhood that is going to be or attempted to be rezoned from single homes to multifamily, and the way that that has been handled at this point has caused me great concern. And I'm very sad upon learning that many of those homes have been pulled out. I suspect that city permits were needed in order to destroy those homes and pull them out. And this has all been done when there hasn't been a 100% concurrence of the families within that neighborhood to surrender it. I'm concerned with the proximity of this right across the street from Lake Ridge Junior High School. This is not a good element for this junior high school. I had the opportunity to meet with a lone resident this past week. Mr. Roberts, a very good man, humble man, family man of eight kids. became emotional a couple of times as I spoke to him. I cannot understand why a developer would go in and begin to undo a community when there are still homeowners there. I went to the PEG website today to read their mission statement. Their mission statement on their website is not consistent with what I've seen by the taking out of this development before it's even been rezoned. Now maybe you'll tell me that it needs to be torn apart before it can be rezoned, but it has the earmarkings. If you're a person such as myself looking from the outside in, it looks as if something is happening underneath the table that shouldn't be happening. Why would they destroy this neighborhood when it hasn't been rezoned yet and not 100% of the people on board with it? So my hope is that you'll consider it. There's certainly much more to learn, and I'm looking forward to talking to the PEG developers myself to understand their approach and working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greetings, Mr. Mayor, honorable council members. My name is Gary Tibbetts, and I likewise live in the Lake Ridge Heights subdivision area. Several months ago, when we first heard of this proposed development coming across the street from 400 West, our neighborhood, the PEG development people, I think it's Woodbury Corporation possibly, they held a public meeting at Lake Ridge Junior High, and in that meeting we expressed our concerns looking at their proposed development. Several of the things that we discussed with them was there shouldn't be any access onto 400 West from 1000 South. We discussed the height of the buildings being too tall and obstructing our views. We discussed parking spaces and the lack thereof. During that meeting, they made promises or commitments that have obviously changed. As I looked at their paperwork that they submitted to the Planning Commission, they really haven't done anything that they promised us that they would do. In fact, they have changed the structure of the program. There's now a parking garage that appears to be 3 stories high right across the street from Lake Ridge Junior High and my friend Alan Parrish's home, who's here this evening, and my friend Scott Stevenson that lives right next to him. They told us that that horse property would be a buffer zone. Now they're turning it into a 3-story parking garage close to the junior high, which will give the junior high kids a nice place to hide. Plus, it obstructs the view, and it's a concrete structure that is very unbecoming to the neighborhood. I am also concerned, as Scott is, as to the way they have handled the offers and Mr. Roberts and his refusing to surrender to their offers and make a purchase. This project should not go through until 100% of the community is on board. And now he's the lone holdout, and they're proposing to build this property right around his home, maintain 1000 South as an access to his home alone, and also as an access for these apartment dwellers to enter and exit onto 400 West, which the developers told us 2 months ago there would not be an access there. The only accesses would be to the east and to the west. So we're concerned about the buffer zone that they promised us and the parking structure that they're now proposing, which was not on their original plans. And we still continue to maintain that the buildings are too high and obstruct the views of the fine people that live in the Lake Ridge subdivision immediately across from 400 West. So this will be coming before you on May 23rd. We would ask that you give it serious consideration to make some adjustments or decline the proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now hear from Sarah Bateman, after which we'll hear from Kevin Warner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and residents of Orem. My name is Sarah Bateman, and I am inviting everyone to participate in the upcoming Community Free Swap. Now in its 6th year, we've done 2 a year here at the City Center, at the park, at the pavilion, and it's essentially like a free thrift shop, like a pop-up thrift store for the day. and it's benefit a lot of families here in the extended community in Utah County. We've had anywhere from 300 to 800 people come and freely share with each other, with strangers, with friends, and it's always been very inspirational. So if you're doing your spring cleaning and you would like to share with your neighbors, come to our event on June 3rd. It's a Saturday from 8 a.m. to noon, and we also love volunteers. They get the first pick of things, so we hope you can come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Kevin Warner, I live here in Orem. I'm just behind the church, 4th North, 4th East. And I came before you I believe in January. I'm the realtor that is involved with the new Flying Horse condominium project on Sand Hill just south of Walmart. And Bruce Dickerson, who is the developer and who I'm selling for, asked me to come and just kind of give a report on what's going on. No complaints here. We're very grateful to have been given this opportunity. There was a concern about who would it just be students? Would they cheat? Would there be parking problems? But just as we had said that it would happen, we've got 40 of 134 units under contract with mostly young couples and singles. I wrote a contract already today with a young couple. I have another contract to write for another young couple at 7 o'clock tonight. It's just a really good thing that the city allowed this to go forward, and it's not anything. The concerns should be, I don't think you need to worry about what the concerns were. Again, parking problems, the cheating, too many people in, because and to dampen the sales, we have not even listed this property. It is only a $500 sign. They're finding us. Anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate you.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate it. We'd now like to go ahead and close our personal appearances and move on to our scheduled items. There are no consent items.
Mayor, may I just interrupt? I apologize, but we have members of our water section who are here tonight and who were wanting an opportunity. Can we just have an opportunity to recognize them tonight? Sure. Invite them to come forward, given that it is Water Week, and appreciate Chris.
I was unaware of that.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I failed to coordinate that with you. If I could have Neil come forward. Neil Winterton is our Water Resources Division Manager. Lane Gray is our Water Section Manager. We also have Cody Ecker, John Jensen, our Public Works Technicians. I'm sorry, Richard Ecker, our Public Works. Richard Cody, I'm sorry. I got it all mixed up. Richard Cody, one of our Public Works Technicians. Mark Scott, our Field Supervisor in our water supply group of our water section. And then also Chris Clements in charge of our water quality. We did have another individual that came tonight, but he was on call and he got called out just as we were getting ready to start. And that is Spencer Chapman. He was calling on a leak, or called out on a leak. And so I'd like to recognize these fine men who represent our water section, our water delivery and supply. It's a well-managed system. And these men are willing to come out at all hours of the day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Whether it's when their daughter's having a birthday party or during Christmas when it's snowing out and they're in a hole, it's 30 degrees and they're in water up to their knees or whatever it might be. If you can imagine, these are some of our unsung heroes in the city of Orem. And I'd just like to recognize them and the water section on this special time in the water industry, with it being the National Drinking Water Week for May 7th through the 13th. So,
may I say that we have some of the best water in the country, and we get compliments on it all the time, and we appreciate you keeping the water flowing for us. Could we have a round of applause for them?
Neil Winterton would also like to make just a couple comments.
Sure.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how great it tastes and every aspect of the water quality. A lot of these guys represent the distribution portion. Chris already mentioned their dedication. While I stand here with a sunburn from attending weekend soccer games and weeknight soccer games, their sunburns and their hands and their dirty pants all come from the dedication that they have to keeping the water flowing. Our team is more knowledgeable and more dedicated than any other team, I will say, in the United States. And we still remain one of the most, if not the affordable, rate-wise water utilities in the state and in the country. So I wanted to add that as well. We appreciate the community support that we have and the council support for helping us continue that tradition. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. I do know that our water rate is half of what one of the communities just to the north of us is. So we appreciate the efforts and the diligence that goes into it and the great resource that water is for our community. So thank you. We'll now go ahead and move on to our schedule item, the first one being a public hearing on the CDBG Community Block Final Statement of Projected Uses of Funds, and our presenter is Steve Downs.
Thanks, Mayor and City Council. As you know, about a month and a half ago, we came together with this. We came to you with this proposal. By HUD guidelines, we're required to have a 30-day wait period before we hold a second public hearing. So the 30 days have passed. We're now here for that second public hearing about proposed use of the Community Development Block Grant. I have here Tom Walsh, who's the chair of our CDBG Advisory Commission, who will go over our proposal. Just wanted to speak to you a little bit about the program, and for those in the audience that may be unfamiliar with the program. Communities over 50,000 can apply to become an entitlement community through HUD's Community Development Block Program. We've done that for a number of years, and that funding comes from the federal government. It's to benefit low and moderate income families and neighborhoods in our community, and we've used it for a lot of very worthy purposes, both physical construction within neighborhoods and housing, but also public services such as various types of treatment that a low and moderate income family may not be able to afford otherwise. So historic allocations have been about $600,000 a year. What we're proposing shows a total of $920,000. That includes some income from a housing rehabilitation program that we run, also unspent money from previous years that we can roll over, and we have plans for that in the upcoming year. This year, there's some chaos in Washington about what the future of this program might hold. It was originally proposed to be eliminated in the initial budget, but Friday night, President Trump signed a bill funding it at $3 billion, which is what it has been funded in the past. So we are told that by the end of June, we'll have our allocation amount, our figure specifically, but to expect an allocation similar to last year, which our proposal already put into place. So with no, let me just also, our CDBG Commission members, we have a couple of them here. Tom Walsh, our chair, of course, who's next to me, Chris Bennett, Russ Bird, who was recently just appointed to our Recreation Advisory Commission, Vicki Johnson, Ginny Ball, Braden Santo, and Ken Ransom is here in the back as well.
We have them stand up.
Yeah, please, if you would. Russ and Ken, and again, we think that they spent a lot of evenings, a few evenings with us, hearing proposals and applications, and making the difficult decision, as you know, of how do we split this money up and try to continue to fund as much worthy programs as we can. With that, I'll turn it over to Tom to talk a little bit again about our recommendation for each of these organizations.
So for the first one that we have, it's the Women and Children in Crisis. They asked for $10,000, and we recommended again to fund the $10,000. The next one was Family Support and Treatment Center. They were asking for $15,000, and our recommendation was $11,000. The next one was Project READ. They asked for $7,500. We recommended $3,500. Parent Education Resource Center, or PERC, they were asking for $3,000, and our recommendation was $2,000. Community Action Service Center, or Services and Food Bank, sorry, they asked for $17,000, and we recommended $12,500. The Literacy Resources Incorporated, they asked for $3,600. We recommended 0 because they did not qualify for the CDBG funding. Recreation and Habilitation Services, or RAW, they asked for $11,885. We recommended $7,500. Mountain Lands Community Health Center asked for $15,000. We recommended $4,500. Friends of Utah County Children's Justice Center was asking for $24,000, and we recommended $13,000. Friends of the Coalition asked for $7,500. Our recommendation was $7,000. Utah County 4-H asked for $7,500, and our recommendation was $1,750. Community Health Connect, they were asking for $5,000, and we recommended $4,000. Kids on the Move Incorporated, they were asking for $20,000, and we recommended $5,000. People Helping People asked for $5,000, and we recommended the full $5,000. Rocky Mountain University of Health Professionals, they were asking for $8,000. We recommended $4,000. House of Hope asking for $5,000. We recommended $2,000. City of Orem Administrative asked for $103,000, and we recommended the full amount. City of Orem Section 108 loan payment, they were asking for $105,000. We recommended the same amount. City of Orem Public Facilities asked for $150,000. We recommended $250,000. $150,000 that was reprogrammed from last year. And then the City of Orem Code Enforcement asked for $130,000, and we recommended the full amount. Habitat for Humanity, they didn't ask for anything because of things that have rolled over from the past. We switched over to them, and so we want to continue the rollover for the $185,000. And this is just the summary of everything that we just discussed.
And you'll see that the total there is that $920,000. Any questions from Mayor, City Council?
I was just going to mention there are a lot of great causes here that we help to fund. You had talked about the Friends of the Coalition, but that's actually the Food and Care Coalition, and that's a great resource for those in need. Kids on the Move does a great, service to people within our community. I mean, as I go down through the list, Center for Women and Children in Crisis helps to fund the women's homeless shelter. There are great things going on here, and really this is what I think government's all about, to help those in need. So I appreciate it, and I like what I see here. I'll turn some time over to Councilmember LeRae.
So I noticed that obviously you didn't give everyone what they asked for. Were there some guiding principles of how you determined how much you were going to give them? Was it the number of people served? Was it their actual programming? Tell me how that process, and some of them were quite substantially cut. So.
Yes. With it, of course, they asked for way more than we have. So we had to cut in certain places. We had a lot of factors in there. The main factor, though, was primarily how it would help Orem. And some of these help other people as well in Utah County, but our main deciding factor, I think, was how it would benefit the citizens of Orem the most.
We also looked at how absolutely critical the service is, and how many, for example, the Center for Women and Children in Crisis, which you referenced, Mayor, only shelter in Utah County that provides that service. and we wanted to make sure that they had all they needed to function. Some of these other ones provide critical services, and there's other organizations that provide similar services. So we looked into that, also looked into their ability to bring in outside funding. For example, a women's shelter like that may not have the same ability to go out and fundraise like some of these other organizations, but still a critical service. But what Tom's point in our commission is at the end of the day, how does this benefit the people of Orem, as that's where this funding is intended to go?
Thank you.
Councilmember Sumner.
I was just wondering, as time goes on, do you get more applicants each year, or is it pretty well? These all sound so familiar, but do you get additional applicants?
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, it doesn't go up much. Occasionally there'll be a new one, and a couple years ago there was a new one that came in. There's some that won't apply from year to year. They really look at how much they need that funding. Federal money comes with some significant restrictions and requirements for reporting, and sometimes the amount they may ask for in their mind doesn't warrant the amount of work that would go into it. So occasionally you'll have organizations that stop applying, or they'll apply every few years. For example, House of Hope went a few years without it, but they needed to replace a playground equipment for their children that are there covering. So they came back this year specifically with that request.
Okay. Thanks for what you do. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Lenz.
So with what's up there on the screen, I was wondering if you could just walk through mainly those last four, starting with code enforcement. And Steve, maybe you could just walk us through what types of uses that will get put to, and public facilities, maybe have some examples of how that could be used.
So code enforcement, we have 3 officers that are dedicated to working in our neighborhoods, building relationships with our neighborhoods. We call it community policing. Within that group is also an officer that specializes in mental health. And so he works with people, oftentimes code enforcement issues specifically, as we look at what we consider maybe nuisances as far as lawns and other things go. Oftentimes there's something more there. And he works specifically with that individual and their family to identify the mental health maybe behind it and to get them treatment that way. But they also work with the neighborhood to get neighborhoods cleaned up. And obviously some of our older neighborhoods can be more prone to challenges, and so they want them to be up to some level, because the level of that neighborhood oftentimes determines the type of activity that happens in that neighborhood. And so they spend all that time, and so we only pay a portion of their salaries and benefits out of this, and it's based on the amount of time they're spending in those neighborhoods. So they keep a diligent track of how many cases they are on and who they're dealing with, and we pin that in what neighborhoods qualify for CDBG funding, and that amount accurately reflects the portion that they spend. Public facilities, this is money really dedicated to upgrade some of our community parks and neighborhoods that are that qualify for that funding. We have some neighborhoods that are in some need of some upgrades, and we want to make sure that we're doing our part with the property that's in our control to set some type of standard or show that we have that same commitment to that neighborhood. A couple of those neighborhoods are Westmore, Sharon Park, and Geneva Park. And so what we hope to do with that is to upgrade the neighborhood parks there. That could be with taking out some existing tennis courts that are in disrepair and repairing or replacing them with something like that, or sometimes the playground equipment is 25 plus years old. And so we want to create a place that has good recreational opportunities for those families. So that public facility stays in those neighborhoods specifically. The administration pays for the salaries and benefits of those that administer the program. There is a lot of requirements that come with federal funding, a lot of reporting that has to be filed monthly, as well as going through the applications and meeting with all the organizations and monitoring everyone to make sure that they're using their funding appropriately. The Section 108 loan payment is a commitment we made to some businesses years ago that we would continue to make their loan payment if they would meet certain benchmarks in regards to jobs being created and revenue being brought to the city, and they've far exceeded their requirements. So our commitment was that we would make that loan payment for them as long as they stayed in Orem and kept meeting the benchmarks that were set.
So on the administration line item, is that set by a federal mandate, or is that based off of the accounting staff figuring out what the actual cost of that is?
So we are limited to 20% of the entitlement amount plus program income, and so that's about $120,000 is what we're allowed. We went through it to determine what we actually need, and so that $17,000 could be freed up for other things. So the number you see there is based on what we actually need. There is a cap though set by HUD of 20%, in our case $120,000.
Okay. Thank you.
One thing I wanted to bring up in regards to what Councilmember Lentz brought up, code enforcement is a very important item. In speaking with our police, it allows them to go into neighborhoods and actually be proactive. So they see areas where there's a concern, they can go in and start to work with that neighborhood ahead of time. That actually keeps the crime rate down, the drug rate down. That's a very excellent way to administer and to work with neighborhoods within our community that need some additional help. So, I'm glad to see that there. Habitat for Humanity is just a huge item for helping those in our community who can't get into a home by themselves. We've seen that in the Washburn-Reams estates, where we had 3 homes built for those in need. We've seen it recently last year in a home that was remodeled in Orem for a family that was able to get in. I and my family have worked on those homes, physically helping to build, and I've been involved with the home that was recently refurbished last year as far as going to the ceremony, not doing anything with the home. But it was great to meet the family, see the needs that are being met, and see what's happening. So I just appreciate what this money is used for again.
And I will mention with Habitat for Humanity, you referenced new homes. There is some federal money the Habitat gets to build new homes. This is specifically for rehabilitation projects. So this is, in many cases, you'll find single elderly living in a home with a roof that leaks every time it rains. And this, for low-income...
Or it's remodeling.
Yeah, low-income individuals that meet those kinds of substandard living conditions, this money allows us to put them in standard, above standard living conditions so that they can enjoy their life.
Appreciate that clarification. So this is a public hearing. We'd like to open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to come forward, please keep your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name. Nice to have you here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Karen McCandless, and I am the Executive Director of Community Action Services and Food Bank. I want to thank the city for considering our application. I want to thank the Citizens Committee as well. The public service part of a CDBG grant is very small, and I can't imagine having to divide it up and try and figure that out with all the good causes we have in our community. I wanted to publicly thank you and thank the city and the commission for recommending funding for community action at $12,500. I brought this tonight to show you what some of that funding will do, and it's in our grant application. We have in Orem a number of schools that are Title I schools where there are a number of children who receive free and reduced lunches, and on weekends they don't always have the opportunity to have food at home. And what these kids do, and we give out thousands and thousands of these each year, school year, these provide food for children on the weekend. You probably can't see it from here. There's some macaroni and cheese, some applesauce, fruit snacks, Rice Krispie treat, granola bars, juice, things like that. We deliver these to the schools, and teachers will put these into the backpacks of children who will need this food on the weekends. So thank you for that. I also serve as the president of the board of directors for Family Support and Treatment Center, and so I want to thank you for that recommendation and that funding as well, so we can have funding to provide therapy services for low-income individuals in our community, as that's something that's sorely needed as well. Unfortunately, that's needed, but I want to thank you for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your concerted efforts in helping and working with these people, and we would like to mention that Karen McCandless was a longtime member of our city council years ago, and we appreciate all the good work she does for our city. Any other comments? Yes.
Thank you for Mayor and Council. I'm Eric Jorgensen with Habitat for Humanity. I administer the Critical Home Repair Program here in Orem, and I just wanted to thank you once again for your support in allowing us to do the work that is so critical here for the residents of Orem. Oftentimes I am helping elderly women on fixed incomes of $600 a month or less. Nothing to live with, and in need of accessibility, roofing, plumbing, electrical issues, and your generous support of our program is what allows us to help these individuals and help them maintain their independence and livelihood. So once again, Habitat for Humanity would just like to thank you with all our hearts for your support.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes.
I've spoken before. Some people may look up on there and see Rocky Mountain.
Tell us your name.
My name is Vic Morris with Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions, and they see that and they wonder what that is. The grant funding that we obtained from Orem City through CDBG goes to our community rehabilitation clinic, where we provide physical therapy for the underserved, indigent, and uninsured individuals in Utah County. About a third of our patients that come through there from Orem. And with your funding and additional funding that we've been able to obtain, we're increasing our open hours this month so that we will be open 40 hours a week, and we can treat twice as many patients from Orem. And so we're grateful to you for that, and we're excited to be able to serve the citizens of Orem.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? All right, we'll go ahead and close the public portion of this hearing and bring it back to the council. Any comments from the council?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion. By resolution, the City Council adopt the Community Development Block Grant CDBG final statement of projected uses of funds 2017-2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
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 Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and for the Citizens Committee that helps with this. Appreciate it. We'll now go to item number 16, which is a tentative adoption of the Orem fiscal year 2017-18 tentative budget. Our presenters are Richard Manning and Brandon Nelson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're, as we set up here, I know that you all look forward to this with bated breath as we move into first part of adopting the next fiscal year's budget. It's what you're seeing here is more the culmination of about 6 months worth of work. This year, as we get going and waiting for this to come up, the state legislature passed a new law, HB 164, which not tonight, but in June when we come back for the considering the adoption of the final budget, we'll need to have a public hearing prior to the budget public hearing where we talk about the transfer from the enterprise funds to the general fund and what that entails. So I want to briefly go over that, what it is. And we've been doing this for years, and it's something that is not unfamiliar to you. But the city properties use the utilities just like the businesses and the residents do. So we use water, sewer, stormwater, street lighting. And recently, last several years, the state auditor has required that we charge ourselves the retail rate for the use of those utilities. So what it leaves us with is, and the general fund has to pay the utilities for that cost. And it puts us in the position of, one, we could raise our taxes to pay for these services, or we could cut some services to enable us to pay the utilities, or we transfer the funds back from the utilities. So what happens is we go through and we will in the budget, through the accounting, we will pay from the general fund to the various utilities. Water gets $900,000. The sewer, $16,000, stormwater, $130,000, street lighting, $15,000. And this is how it happens, that in the budget, money goes from the general fund to the respective utilities, and then through this transfer process, that exact same amount of money comes back. Now, why? Because the utility fees already encompass servicing the city properties. It's something the city has been doing for years, and this is the extent of the transfer we take out of our utilities is just to serve ourselves. So the bottom line, the same services that the residents have always enjoyed, they still receive for the same cost, and we don't have to cut services or raise taxes, and we satisfy the demands of this law and the state auditor to show how the money and the services go back and forth. So that is a public hearing we'll have to have in June to go through that, and it has to be a separate hearing from the budget. Okay, so here we are this year. The proposed budget is $112 million, and that's a chunk of change. And the way the state has us do is, this is kind of like football season. This is the kickoff. And this is where you get in and, you know, it's formally out there that people can weigh in on things they might want to see tweaked or amended or added or deleted from the budget. To this point, we started with you in February where we had work sessions, March 3rd, the retreat, and a couple of other work sessions where we reviewed with you the various components of the budget. And by and large, what we reviewed is built in here tonight. The highlights, there are no tax increases, there are a few new positions, some operations and expansion requests, fleet replacement as always, and capital projects. We will go over each of the new positions, each operation request, fleet in general, and just the highlights of the capital expansion or program. The $112 million, you can see from as we've progressed on the last few years how it has grown. There's $91 million in new revenue, almost $0.4 million in transfers. That's money flowing back and forth between various funds as they pay for services. For example, the self-insurance fund, all the funds pay into it to pay for our insurance policies, you know, liability and things like that. And because you'll see that this figure here on right there with appropriation surplus, because the plan to pay for the renewal of and refurbishment of our utility systems is a pay-as-you-go. We accumulate the cash maybe over a series of years, then we build a project. So you should see from now on appropriations of surplus that are fairly significant as we pay for different projects. If you see a year where there is a lower appropriation of surplus, that means we're stockpiling money for a big project down the road. Here's the major funds we have.
So, Richard, maybe one thing I should mention there. So what we're talking about is that we have adopted or pursue the policy of pay-as-you-go. So it's actually payment for infrastructure needs and improvements are being paid for through increases of fees rather than increased bond debt. So we've tried to keep our bond debt down low. In fact, it's gone down in recent years. And so we're charging those who use the service for the increased infrastructure needs of the service.
Yes.
Rather than going into heavier debt.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay.
So in that aspect, it gives you more, a dollar you set aside for capital spending, you get $1 worth of construction out of it instead of, say, 80 cents or something. Revenues by fund, we account for, the general fund is the biggest fund, as you can see, with $55 million. That's where police, streets, parks, fire, ambulance, that's where those things are found. Road, that's the gas tax that you pay for. Care is the arts and the recreation spending. Debt service is self-explanatory. And the utilities pick up down here. You have water reclamation. They are run like an independent business.
That's why you call them an enterprise fund.
That's why they're called an enterprise fund. Thank you. And their fees cover their costs. And as utility rates go up, and a big set aside for capital spending down the road. The general fund gets the most attention because that's what people generally equate as the city. This year, there will be 49 million new revenue, transfers in of 6 million, and we're not using any surplus for a total of 55 million. The bulk of it comes from taxes, property, sales, franchise tax, and a couple of other smaller ones. Business.
If we could hold on a second. Sure. Councilmember Larray's got a question.
So I have a question. We are very sales tax dependent for our revenue source. How conservative are you from year to year, not knowing exactly what those will be? Are you taking a certain percentage, or are you, how conservative are you? I guess I'm trying, how you determine what you think you're going to get, knowing it's very...
Yeah. As it goes with the economy, as you pointed out. When the economy is good, sales tax is good. When it's down, sales tax is really down. This gives you from 2009 to through 18. Now, what has just dropped off is when we went into the recession, our sales tax then was right about here, just over 19 million. As you see, it took a long time to get back there. This year, we think we'll get about 20.4, 20.5. Next year, we think it'll be 21,008,200. The 8,200 is a UTA pass-through that we show there, but we think it'll be about $21 million. Now, how conservative are we from year to year? We watch that more closely than any of our other revenues. And we have a couple of formulas we look at. We gauge what is happening with the economy, particularly what is happening with raises and unemployment and employment growth. And you watch those, and you can figure out very accurately what is you will see in sales tax, because people spend what they earn. So in Utah County, the latest figure, for the state of Utah is like 5% change year over year in family income to spend.
So would you? I mean, on the expense side, though, are you still hedging your bet by not spending the full 21 million? I'm just trying to figure out.
We don't. If we think we're going to get, if we were only going to get 21 million, if thought that's what everything shows, we would have budgeted 20.5.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so we don't want to go out there because government lags the economy. So as the economy starts down, we will still stay up very well for a while. Then we'll drop, but we're still lagging. And so when it comes back, the opposite happens. The economy goes up and we're still behind.
Okay. Do you have a certain percentage of conservative? Would you only budget on 90% of your 95? Is there a guiding principle, or are you just?
I've never looked at it that way.
Okay.
Amy?
I think maybe a couple of examples that speak to Brandon and Richard's work are recent years where we've had obviously times of good times, but we've also had opportunities from a budget perspective where we have underestimated revenues and to some degree overestimated expenditures, and as a result, we've had monies available at the end of each fiscal year for some very significant capital projects. And I see what Richard and Brandon are doing as a real conservative but mindful approach to budgeting and for keeping us out of harm's way.
Right.
And so, is this a perfect process? No, but I feel very comfortable in the way that they're working this program and conservatively looking at all of our revenue streams. Ideally, obviously, we'd love to be spot on, but the next best alternative is exactly what they're doing now, and that is underestimating revenues, overestimating expenditure.
Thank you. I just want to show that we are being conservative in what we do, as well as trying to anticipate any downturns. So thank you for your work.
So typically, as I've watched you do this with this principle that you've talked about for years, which Jamie has mentioned, of overestimating expenses and underestimating revenues, is typically at the end of an actual year, our expenses are always less than what we had estimated, and we usually typically have some kind of surplus due to the revenues. So I likewise appreciate that approach and think that's wise, particularly where you don't always have everything right in place at the time that you look at it, that there are, leading aspects to it and you're not sure where it is until it actually happens. So
It is a bit like balancing your checkbook 18 months in the future.
Yes. Brandon?
In part, that the 15% recommendation that we made for fund balance, that is in part why that recommendation is there, because, we don't know what that answer is going to be until we get to the fiscal year end. So thereby, we have that recommendation to say, oh, yeah, when we look back, we can see what happened, and we should, in essence, we should now use that money to the public's benefit.
Right.
If we are looking forward now and saying, oh, wait a minute, the economy has made a turn for the worst, we still have leeway to be able to not necessarily do that 15%. We still now have funds available to help us with a declining economy if that was the case. So that was part of that reasoning why we set that 15%.
Sure. We had a great learning experience a few years ago. Councilmember Lentz.
Yeah, just a question on that note. Do you know offhand how many years in a row we've been successful in underestimating revenues and overestimating expenses? What's our win streak essentially as far as coming out ahead?
So we've done 3 years now in a row.
Okay.
I would certainly anticipate the fiscal year we are currently in is also going to produce some funds that need to end up being transferred as well. So I'm anticipating that will end up being 4 in a row.
Okay. And I mean, if we looked at the last 20 years,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we've been using the same approach prior to that, but would you estimate that we've been successful in that sense 80 to 90% of the time?
The only year I'm aware of where we really had to put the brakes on was when the recession really hit us, and we had to really dial it back. But even in that year, we finished with revenues ahead of expenses. Now, there were some times we were pulling heavily on some built-up reserves to make things work. But as far as complying with the law, we've always done. We're at 98.
And I think in fairness, too, I mean, the last time we saw any sort of economic decline the same way we did a few years ago was the late 1920s, early 1930s. And so if this was baseball, we'd be in the Hall of Fame. But obviously, it's not a perfect system, but it is one where we can, with relative, I guess you could say, security, represent to you that we are being conservative in the manner in which we estimate our revenues.
So not every city in the United States balances their budget every year. I'm aware of some in the Midwest that are in serious trouble to the tune of almost $1 billion. But we as the city of Orem balance our budget every year. We as the state of Utah balance our budget every year. I wish that were true of our federal government, and I appreciate your efforts in keeping us in sync that way.
And Mayor, just to note, by law, and I don't know if our citizens are aware of this, but by law, we are required to bring to you a balanced budget annually.
But we don't do a continuing resolution every 3 months, and we do have a balanced budget at the end of the year. So thank you, but keep going.
Property taxes, we won't know what the rate is going to be until we get to our next meeting. Here's our history. There's no proposed tax increase. We are seeing growth, and that should start to come along. This is, if you want to know where we get the most conservative, is the growth in property tax. Because once you put the number there, and we have had many years where the budget's adopted before the county tells us what the number is going to be, because they are the ones who figured out, and they give us the number. We have an adopted budget, and there's 1 year we went, oh boy. We just said we're getting more property tax than we're going to receive. So we did a quick punt, and we in the end, it works. But we would rather be very conservative here, and if it comes in more, great. So this is a very conservative thing, and we just adopt the rate that comes in because we're not going to do the August hearing on that. Franchise tax, it comes on telephones, cable, gas, electric, water and sewer rates. It's fairly stable, and you'd think it would be going up more than it does as there are more people, but there are a declining number of phones, and because of that, it stays down, but the other increases and the other utilities kind of make this a fairly stable source of revenue to the city. And those are mentioned at 6%. Phones and cable TV have a lower rate. Our building permit fees they're really one. You'll never see that money again. So we keep this underestimated, and any surplus is used for capital projects in the following year. But as you can see through the years, we have received lately considerably more than we budget, and we don't want to start building up operations dependent upon one-time sources of income and building, because we're virtually all built out, and there won't be years like we've had in the past, so we don't want to build a budget on that. A fair amount of income comes in through contracts for police and fire and ambulance with other communities or entities. So we provide some services to Linden and Vineyard. They're both growing well, and Alpine School District, we have the officers in the schools, and that's about $2.4 million in income. Vineyard's growing, as anyone knows, very rapidly. And in doing this, we're setting aside money to staff a future fire station that will serve the west side of the city and Vineyard. Everyone likes to see the comparison of where we are. The interesting thing is, what we're showing here are Orem's proposed utility rates against the other cities listed here, their existing utility rates.
So these are the proposed rates?
Our proposed are already factored in against their existing, and you see where we generally come out very well. Franchise tax, for those that are too far away, everyone's the same.
So I find it interesting on water that we are as low as we are. When you look at some of the cities close to us, American Fork, Pleasant Grove, Linden, we're much, much lower. And sewer follows right in place with that. Mm-hmm. So, we appreciate what is occurring in the city and that these rates are low to help our citizens.
And this property tax rate, that will change according to what it takes to generate the amount of revenue that the city has requested for years over the county.
Councilmember Lentz has a question.
Just on that last slide, Richard. Do we have any sense, again, just kind of a ballpark figure, what percentage of these cities are considering or looking at increasing some of these utility rates? Because again, you pointed out these are our proposed rates compared to their existing rates, but my guess would be at least a portion of these are considering increasing rates. I'm not sure if any are considering a decrease in the rates.
I would be surprised if they decrease just because of the need.
So I know Provo
up and going.
Provo is considering increasing their rate.
Yeah,
I'm aware of that.
Provo, some significant ones. Pleasant Grove has had some significant, and I'm not sure if they're at the end of ramping it up, and now they're in a cost of living kind of a scenario. Generally, everyone goes up some every year because the cost to maintain a system increases. And
we're kind of unique in Orem where we were held flat for a really long time rather than having small incremental increases, and so I'm just trying to get some understanding. If you look 4 or 5 years down the road, are we still going to be in a similar position on this pecking order here?
My recollection is if the increases to go through to rebuild our systems, we will trend more towards the average, but we're still going to, as my recollection is, we will still be below average for most of them.
And that's below the existing average, you're saying?
Well, what they anticipate that their averages will also be going up.
Okay.
So, we'd be trending upward, but still below the median of there. Okay.
Councilmember Sumner has a question.
I just want to say with the water and sewer, as all of us probably have had neighbors, friends, somewhat complain about the increases in that we have to have, but you pull out this chart and show them to them. I've done that several times. There's one similar to it, and they think, "Oh, yeah, I guess I'm in a pretty good spot."
Yeah.
Yeah. This, in my opinion, this chart explains a lot.
I was going to comment. The other thing that we don't necessarily know is say Springville with water. While we may be raising our rate because we've taken it upon ourselves to improve our water system, is Springville perhaps in a state of where we're at right now, living off of these rates, this low rate that they've had for such a long time, but their comeuppance is coming, that they're going to have to do something to replace that system. Now, I'm not saying that Springville is that the case, but we don't know that about each one of these entities, where they are with their life cycle of having to replace their infrastructure.
And do we know for the water table specifically, is this just based off of culinary water? Because I think some of these cities might have secondary water in place as well. Richard, can you speak?
We take their rates and make it as if they were here in Orem. So using our utilization patterns, we just kind of bring them back. So if their rates were here in Orem, what would it look like? So we get kind of an apples to apples.
Okay.
Anything else here?
Nope, keep going.
Moving in. Across the city, 43 million is for personnel expenses. Operations is 52. Capital is 16.4 to the total of 112. So you can see that personnel is a big cost, but it's not the largest cost. This will kind of give you an idea of by fund where the different personnel and operations breakdowns come. All the water we use, we also have to buy ourselves, and that's a fairly hefty expense. You see the capital needs in the column next to operations, and you can see the percent each of these funds are to the total. There's departmental stewardship. Now, as we go through here, Public Works spans several funds, and they are big operation. You can understand the size that they have. Police, again, is large. Administrative services, you think, why would a little department with 27 employees have 10% of the budget? It's because we also manage the debt service, the insurance, purchasing. So we spread across several funds. And so it's not just down the hall where you go to see us. The breadth of the stewardship was a lot larger. So some funds that you go, I know there aren't many employees there, but they're managing a lot of the city's resources. That's why their slice of the pie seems unduly large. City manager, again, spreads across several funds. Library, recreation, and the attorney is just an amazing amount there. And you all, he's going to shoot me one of these days. And then you all a very, very small percentage of it. Now we're headed again to the additions in this proposed budget. In a non-departmental area, we want more people to know the things we do, so we're setting aside some money for just the promotion of the many, many events that we have going on. Employee incentive program to recognize good ideas, tweaks and practices, et cetera, that make us a more efficient operation. We just turned 98 last Friday. 100's coming up, and want to have in that year a good celebration of our centennial. It'll be the only time any of us will ever be around for a centennial type celebration. And setting aside some money for that down the road. Next year there should be some more. A lot of people tend to have a hard time obeying traffic laws, And if you can enforce certain areas that are hot spots for lawbreakers, it helps get people to get in line, so it makes everyone's traveling safety. So some money's there to rotate around where it's needed. In the city manager's area, some more community outreach so that we can promote the events that we do. Development services, as a development comes in, they will have their experts that say, hey, we've modeled what our development is, its impact on your services. Here it is. We set aside a little bit of money to have someone else come in and verify. So
That's one of my favorite pictures right there, by the way.
You like that? Well, it does help to plan ahead. And then if we can get our as developers submit their plans and whatnot, if they can do that digitally, it'll be a lot better all the way around. Police, as they upgrade some ongoing funding for radar upgrades, you'll see a lot of things like this where you have, looks like my pen has died, but a lot of things will say ongoing where it's equipment that's being replaced. You'll see that instead of laying out 50, 60,000 at once for something, we want to, where we know we have to replace things on every X number of years, we'll just set aside portions of it so that it's never a big hit to the budget. And they're looking for some ways to increase what their software will do for us. And the fat pot maintenance is a carryover as Spielman gets ready to take over the services there. In fire, as we have some taller buildings, they need to train more in that area. Full automated stretcher system, make it easier. The one-time outlay of $17,000 is nothing if we ruin someone's back and have to pay for the surgeries that go with that. And then we talked about in the past the physician that allows our paramedics to administer meds in the field, et cetera, has a contract, and there's an increase with that one. Library is getting an RFID wand, and then setting aside some continuing funding to keep that system updated so it's not $120,000 every 8 years or something like that. Now we've added some park space, the splash pad, the All Abilities playground, and we're going to put in some new operating funding for that so that we can keep them in good operating condition. Every year we try and keep the fleet, put as much toward the ultimate replacement of vehicles to keep them at their prime operating lifespan so we don't spend too much money repairing. And when they reach the point where it's a diminishing return on their value versus the amount of money we're throwing at them to keep them operational, we want to get them out the door. Because it's more, when you take, say, a police officer's car away from him, now that officer's not on the road, particularly if there's not a backup car to use, and you have to put the money to get the car repaired. So when you keep our equipment on the road, you're keeping employees delivering services. And you got to keep those things in mind that without the tools, they can't do it. We used to fund fleet replacement out of reserves garnered in prior years. We now fund it out of operations. Going along with this, there's some employees that over time, their jobs evolve a little bit and they're more demanding, so there's some grade changes, and this brings a fiscal impact of just over $56,000 for these employees. We're going to take a part-time benefited clerk to full-time at the court. We've had an assistant building official, going to make him the chief building official, and to make development services function a little bit more efficiently, taking one of their development services technicians to an administrative assistant role, a senior engineer to a section manager to allow our city engineer more time to see things from the macro level. This one has a star by it because they'd create the position of a deputy fire chief through a series of promotions, and on the bottom side there would be a new firefighter. That's why that price is so much larger than the others. We'd take one police captain, promote him to, or lieutenant, promote to a captain, And then that would then have 3 captains. One of those 3 be promoted to assistant chief. And there would be kind of a different type of structure. But in the past, we had 3 captains, and they would run the 3 main functions of the police department. Some non-benefited positions, a communications assistant, again, to go along with the effort to reach out more.
So a question real quick, and maybe I've missed this or whatever, but it's my understanding we're hiring 2 additional policemen?
They're coming up.
Okay.
A good segue. You know, if you're here early in the morning, you'll see some custodians about the building. So they can complete their rounds in a timely manner at the level we want. They're a little understaffed there. An economic development assistant will be used by shifting some existing funds around, and 1% increase to all the temporary employees. We, for years, have had like you'd call it a part-time attorney in the office. A lot of turnover there. The workload goes up as the legal demands are ever increasing. So we're going to hire a new assistant city attorney, and you have to get them young before they get lured off into other areas. So they've found a kid in grade school they think will be a good attorney down the road. There are 2 police officers, and with that there are some one-time costs of a new vehicle and the equipment that they carry.
So the police department is pretty excited about that because they're in a real need there, and that'll be a real benefit.
Yeah. With our new park space, a new technician in the parks, a new public works technician in water supply, new stormwater project manager. This is due to an increase in EPA regulations where they have to manage not only new construction but existing construction, well, as things that are built, to see if they can maximize the best practices to minimize pollution coming off of someone's site. Total new personnel requests here, $500,000 in new benefited, and you can see across the way there's a merit increase of just under $700,000 available to all benefited employees, and we're just under 1.4 in new personnel costs.
So on the merit increase, that averages 3%, I believe.
That's
is
right.
What we've put in. And $700,000 is quite a bit of money. But in today's world, there's a lot of competition for the employees. And I know that in speaking with, for example, Mountain Land area governments, they're looking at a 3% increase, merit increase. Talking to Linden, I believe they're doing a 3%. It's pretty standard across the board. So.
Yeah. And just generally in the area, employers are paying more because, I mean, our unemployment rate is very, very low here. And when that's low, you have to pay more to get people in. Going to highlighting in this section the capital improvement projects and just kind of the big, the bigger items that are there. In street maintenance, this is a pretty standard year ahead of us. This would be from Fund 20, the road fund. In water, there's a 4-inch water line replacement project in the Emory neighborhood, some general system things, a new well, and this will help us with our discharge from the wastewater plant to help water the neighboring golf course. And automatic meter reading will be taken a bite at a time, and will, particularly using the tiered rate, will make things much better.
So the water reuse system will be, I think, very beneficial because right now we're taking culinary water that's been treated, transporting it from one side of the city all the way to the other, and then putting it on lawns that people play golf on.
When you have a source of water.
When we have the water treatment plant right next door, I would have liked to have seen this done years ago. I don't know that we had the money years ago, but I'm glad to see that it's getting done. So,
And
Councilmember Lentz, did you have a question?
Sorry, I hit my buzzer a little late. So first of all, Preston, I think, is a little nervous when you put up that picture of the young kid for legal services. But I just wanted to clarify the column on those slides where you're talking about compensation, that encompasses all of their not just their salary, but
Yes.
all of their benefits and things like that as well. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. In water sewer. Some big projects, an upgrade to the spring water lift station, ongoing work to keep the lines intact. Anytime they have some areas where if the sewage is flowing rapidly, it builds up a hydrogen sulfide gas and it eats away the line. So where we have some hills in town, you particularly have to pay attention to that.
So I can't help but make a comment seeing Lawrence's picture here, considering that the phantom dumper has been a big item over the past year. But I don't know if anybody's got the latest update. I've heard the last time was the first week of March, and I've heard American Fork has been hit by the phantom dumper, and we haven't in the last few months. Is that correct?
That's, I believe, yeah.
Okay, so we're not hoping for any problems for anybody else, but we're glad to see that maybe he's thinking about moving out of our city. Chris Shirky, do you have any comments on that?
Oops, sorry. Yeah, the phantom dumper is still a phantom, and we haven't found him, but we have heard that he has discharged in American Fork City. He's contacted Lawrence. Lawrence has gone out and they've done some sampling, and it appears to be that they have dumped in that area as well. So it appears to be somebody who's moving throughout, and it's not just somebody discharging from their own property. So,
okay.
And the last occurrence was in March. With this picture here, I'd like to announce that Lawrence Burton's retiring this year as well. So,
that we hate to see.
yeah, July 28th will be his last day.
Okay.
Chris, he's been with the city for
34 years.
34 years.
His first day of work was one of his best. He said he started on July 5th, 34 years ago, and it happened to fall on a Monday, so the 4th of July was on a Sunday, and that meant that he had his first day off with pay. So he thought this has got to be a great gig, so he stuck around for 34 years. No, he's been a wonderful asset for the city. He loves his work and his employees, and he's done a wonderful job for us.
He's a well-respected employee and
Absolutely.
very loyal and has done a superior job.
Yeah.
Okay, Richard.
In stormwater, there's been a change of plans where, and Christian may want to address more, but they've had to really jump on Western Canal, and they want to abandon it. We stormwater in there. They have to
So I drove by the Union Canal last week with water flowing down the canal.
West Union Canal.
Looked like it.
Okay. They were putting water into the West Union Canal from a well that's located on the bottom of this map where the blue line is. And so they have a well at that location, and they put water in there, and it's been discharging water into it. To my knowledge, they haven't diverted any water from the Provo River unless you did see something there that they've done that.
I don't know where the water came from. I just saw water flowing.
Okay. The West Union Canal has two components in it. You have the West Smith Ditch, which services people in the Carterville Road area, in east of Carterville, in the Provo area, and they have an agreement with the West Union Canal Company to convey their water, and so they do need to divert water. However, the West Union Canal Company is not diverting water into that canal this year. They are putting water into it at State Street at about 2000 South with that well, and they'll be providing that irrigation water through that well until they get the canal fully abandoned. But as Richard was saying, with our master plan, we were not aware of their intention to abandon this canal as soon as they had, and it wasn't in our 10-year horizon as we adopted this master plan. What that has forced us to do is we are in the process of updating that stormwater master plan with Bowen Collins and Associates to determine what we can do to take water and convey it elsewhere. In other words, we put stormwater discharges into this canal system and convey that water to the end of that canal. So we've done that historically. We pay them, and we have an agreement to pay for that service that they provide for us. But with the abandonment of that, it's not our intention or our desire to take on that canal because of the liabilities associated with that. You may recall maybe about 8 years ago, there was a child that fell into a siphon, went down underneath Hidden Hollow and came up the other side and survived. And it's those types of things that we want to avoid, and we don't want to take on that responsibility. So we're looking at other alternatives to convey water and not use the West Union Canal. So it's a work in progress. We're starting that right now. We are also reviewing this with our legal staff to determine what our legal responsibilities and liabilities are if we have to take that on, or if we can take on only a portion of it. So we are in negotiations with the canal company currently.
So with the adopted master plans that are supposed to lay out year by year how you go, keeping with the football analogy, you just called an audible. Moving on to Information Technology Fund, they have a lot of services that they have like a subscription rate, and these are kind of highlighted here as we move through that. Moving on to debt service, everyone always wants to know how much is the Utopia Pledge, even though it's not paid out of debt service. We put it here, it's just under $3.1 million. Revenues here are come from property taxes that were voted on, general obligation bonds, and that'll be winding down. The transfers in come in to pay the funds backed by the franchise tax, the street light bond, etc. So this year we'll pay just over $3 million in principal, $300,000 in interest, and we pay some other funds debt out of that. Now here is the outstanding bond debt that we have that's across city. As you can see, it is definitely coming down. This doesn't include some lease debt, but just the bonded indebtedness of the city. So a lot of progress is being made on taking that down. And by
that's actually a pretty dramatic figure there.
Yeah,
it's pretty impressive. I know, part of it was related to the parking garage at Midtown Village, part of it to Northgate, part to some bonding with roads and whatnot that have retired, but it's pretty impressive.
Recreation fund, the fitness center, Sierra Pool, they're in a situation with a lot of competition, and if you note here on the transfers that they've been going up the 402 in the current year and proposed for 404 this coming year, just to break even. And it seems to be, as we've discussed in other settings, that's kind of the way we expect things to be from this point on. Your personnel 1.2, operating costs of $700,000. Community development, you just had the public hearing and adopted what the actual projects would be for that. Now, solid waste is a contracted utility where that service is handled by Waste Management. Now, the fee here does not all go to Waste Management. Some of it does, some of it goes for the disposal. And then we also have the capitals as the projects we do, the neighborhood cleanups that are going on. Those types of costs are encompassed in that. Now, the proposed rates for the coming year, for the first can, it'd be from $10.65 to $10.85. Second can, $9.65 to $9.85. Recycling, $3.20 to $3.25, and green waste from $5.70 to $5.85. With water, and from here on out, this is just fees and charges. With water, the tier rates Tier 1 from 71 cents to 79. Tier 2, 89 to 99. Tier 3, 107 to 118. And Tier 4, 142 to 158. And the only base rate that's proposed to increase is a 3/4 inch meter from 1574 to 17.
And maybe we can just mention that those tiers kick in at a certain quantity of gallons.
Yes.
So
and the size of the tier depends upon the size
of the meter. Yes.
So the larger the meter size, the more you're allowed. Otherwise, some of the 2-inch meter, they turn it on to get a drink and they used 11,000 gallons.
Councilmember Lentz.
Sorry, just on that last slide, Richard, I think you said the only base rate that's increasing is the 3/4 inch meter. My understanding was that AWWA multiplier was used on this. So in effect, wouldn't that mean all of the base rates are increasing?
As they currently exist and have existed for more than 20 years, they haven't been in alignment with the AWWA standards. And so as we change the rates over the course of the next 10 years, we're trying to get that back into alignment. I can't tell you the reason why it is the way it is today, or how it became that way, but we are trying to get that back in alignment with the AWWA standards.
Okay. Will that take the full 7 years to get in alignment, or will it?
It'll probably, for all of those, it'll take probably 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, some of them will come online towards the latter part of the 10 years. For example, maybe the 4-inch comes on in about 6 years. But during the first 5 or 6 years, it's all 3/4 inch.
Okay. You've offended several of our guests here.
We apologize, but I'd like you to recognize the great discount you've had for the last 30 years. Thank you.
So with that comment, everybody's leaving.
They're going out to water the
Sorry. Councilmember Sumner.
Well, I was just wondering why you didn't increase the 1-inch meter.
And that would be the same reason, get it more in line with the AWWA rates, the multiplier as you go on sides. So another way of saying we're a little out of sync with their recommendations right now.
Okay. It'll come back into alignment. In the adopted master plan, you can see in detail, and I can show that to you in an email, on what page that is, where it'll show when those other meters come into alignment. If you'd like, I can send that to you.
Councilmember LaRae.
I have a question back on our contract with the waste, that's a private contract. Was there some proposal that they were going to help us, because of the weight of their trucks, pay some sort toward our roads?
Yeah.
Is that part of that fees, or will they be reimbursing that in a separate line item?
We are charging the fund $209,000, which will come over into streets to be used for street work.
So will that be paid by the company, or will that be paid
in the rates?
Paid in the rates. Okay. Thank you.
If it's paid by the company, it's still paid by the rates. Sewer charge go from 142 to 185 per 1,000 gallons, and the stormwater equivalent service unit from 6 1/4 to 675.
One thing we should mention in there that isn't shown here, but we did make an adjustment to the sewer base rate, so it included all living units within the city.
Yeah.
And that actually brought in about $1 million a year of new revenue. But again, that should be charged to all living units as other cities do, and we have not done in the past.
And we'll just we are in our first year with that, just completing the first year with that. Now, from here on out, we cover every recommended fee change. And we are now on slide 51. By the time we get through our third public hearing of the night, we will be at slide 100. Are there any particular ones? Because here on out, this applies primarily to, not to everyone like the utility increases, but to, more defined, like more customer individualized. So if you have any questions, we can go over them, or if you want, we can go over all of them.
Mayor, may I make just a comment?
Sure.
I just want to reinforce to the City Council and to you, Mayor, the correlation between the proposed utility charges in the next fiscal budget and the list of capital projects that you saw as part of the budget process. There is a direct correlation. So the intent was to build those projects based on the schedule of fees that we have discussed moving forward. If there were to be modifications in those fees, then that would result in a need to adjust or eliminate some of these projects. And so we've been quite mindful to align to the degree possible the charges consistent with the projects that we have going forward. There are opportunities, and we have discussed this in the past, for us to potentially finance some of those projects into the future, thereby extending the term of repayment, for example, and allowing, for example, multiple generations to pay for some of these long-term capital projects that are necessary for us to complete. However, the conscious decision we've made as an organization, you as a governing body, is to focus on a pay-as-you-go basis. And so that's why some of these charges are necessary today and will be necessary in the next 5 or 6 years to accommodate these proposed projects. We can do it differently. It would involve debt. That's not the direction that we've chosen to go. And so I just want to make sure everybody understands that if we adjust the charges, if we adjust the fees, that will necessitate adjustments in the list of projects that we have.
So I think that we're aware that there's a direct correlation, and that was our direction, that there be a direct correlation. And again, that these are being paid through the use of fees of those who actually use the services rather than going into heavier debt through the city. So I believe that's a conscious decision that we've voted on. You can't necessarily say that that is going to happen forever. But that's been our plan to move forward. So, Councilmember Lance.
Richard, I just had, as I was reviewing the tentative budget before today's meeting, I just made a list of like 6 or 7 questions. Some of them are, it's probably going to be like a 1-sentence response. Others will be a little bit more involved discussions. And I'm happy if you want to go through these slides. Maybe some of them will be addressed as you present. But will you have a copy of the budget that you can pull up and skip to page so-and-so, and then we can talk about that there. Okay.
So let me ask you a question.
But you'll be able to have it on the screen as well so that others can see what we're talking about.
So, Richard, are you going to go through all of the fees and all of the changes?
It's what you want me to.
So, and I'd like to ask the council where they're at. I've read through all the fees and all the changes. I'm comfortable with all of them except for the one on the tennis courts, and now I understand why they seem out of line, but I understand why now. The rest I'm comfortable with, but tell me, everybody else, Sam, I'm aware of your questions, but Brent, do you want to go through every fee? Are you comfortable with what you've read?
I'm okay.
Okay, and
I've read through them all myself. My only question was on when we rent out the pavilion at Matapanogas Park for weddings, there was an overnight key charge or something for $200. Is that a refundable if they, I didn't know what that was.
Is Lissy here?
Okay. And is there a cleaning deposit to make sure that they leave it in good condition? We're just hoping that they do. Okay. I might recommend that we put down a cleaning deposit and then have them refund it when it's turned in.
And the overnight, the rationale behind that was if someone would say a wedding or reception wanted to go up on Friday for a Saturday, and Friday was available, they could, for this extra fee, get up there, get it set up. And
okay. That's the only question I had. I'm fine with the rest.
Councilmember Spencer, any questions on fees?
Not really fees. I just had a question on Fund 70, Richard, the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival Fund from last year. I don't see where that money is. I know it's earmarked to go to the auditorium, but I didn't see it in the budget. But
So tell me that again. Sorry.
So where's Fund 72?
72 or 70? I don't know what.
the money.
Storytelling money?
Right.
So technically, it's just sitting in a savings account. So that's not
it's not-
balance sheet, right?
Okay.
It are not reflected in the budget because these are revenues and expenses only. And so that money's
That's
being
from
saved.
previous years.
Correct.
And so it's just sitting in a savings account.
So what you see in the budget this year is an estimated revenue collection of $7,000 and an estimated expense of $7,000. I'm not sure exactly what the expenditures will be, but we just felt like it was such a de minimis amount comparatively speaking to what we've done in the past with the Storytelling Festival that we would at least provide some flexibility for that. Brandon, are you familiar with what the 7,000 is tied to?
No, so I mean that's talking about a balanced budget, right? I mean we put $7,000, perhaps mostly would be donations to the Friends of the Library Fund, and you know, if there was an intent behind that donation that you're going to do a specific thing, then obviously that's the $7,000 in expenses would be associated with those receipts.
Sure. So, and again, the reason being is that the Storytelling Festival has moved to Thanksgiving Point, and so we're no longer involved with that at this point.
Correct. This would, be primarily for the library purposes. Thus the name Friends of the Orem Public Library.
Okay, so Sam, would you want to mention your 6 questions? Yes.
I just need to clarify with Councilwoman LeRae about the hosting center up at the Mount Timpanogos Park. There is a deposit right now. It's a $200 deposit that is fully refundable if it is in good condition. It wasn't put in this slide because it's not a change. So $200 deposit is already there, and the overnight key charge is not a deposit. It is a charge it's the equivalent, like Richard was saying, to almost renting the night before. Just if somebody hasn't reserved it the night before, we will give them the key and they can start setting up.
So they have more time to set up then?
Exactly.
Okay.
It is not refundable.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, Sam, go ahead.
All right. So the first one is on page 94 of the hard copy. So this is for the Care Tax Fund overview. And this is just kind of a wording suggestion under challenges remaining. It says, create a plan that allows for multiple future years funds to be used immediately to complete larger recreational projects that need to be done now and not over a 10-year period. So my concern was just that phrase, that need to be done now. I think that could be construed as fairly subjective, and so I'm wondering if we could phrase that a little bit better so that should we choose to do them now or something along those lines, just because I don't think there's any legal imperative that we make some of those upgrades. But so that was the first one. And if anybody else has any commentary, feel free to interrupt. The next one was on page 98. Let me scroll there. So this is for the debt service fund. Oh, you know what? I might have got the wrong page. It was for the. Oh, I think it's 99. The energy improvement lease. I'd just like to have something in here indicating where that money is coming from, because one of the reasons why we approved that was going to be paid fully out of the savings from the energy improvements that we're making. But if we're just looking at this fresh, it appears to, on the surface, that it's this $700,000 cost that we're getting hit with. So I'm wondering if, even if it's just kind of a footer or
maybe.
What's that?
A narrative of.
Yeah, just to explain that we're paying for that exclusively using the savings that we get from that. The next one was on page 138. This is in the recreation section. And I think this might have just been a typo or something left over from a previous budget, but under the challenges addressed in this budget, applying for care funds to reline the Orem Fitness Center remodel redesign or design process. I think that might have been left over from when they were relining the pool or something like that, but this is talking about the remodel design process. So I'm not sure where that reline word comes from. Maybe that's just a term I'm unfamiliar with in this context, but so maybe just review that.
So is that, I mean, we are looking at a remodel design process for the fitness center. Is it to go back through and say, all right, there's some changes in what we're going to do or whatever?
I would lean to it's probably a mix and match of an old line as they remodeled, as they updated it and didn't quite get the word completely because
we'll blame it on the computer.
A study that would.
They were doing it on their phone and it auto-corrected that. Okay. So page 190 is the next one. The City of Orem Foundation Trust. Let me jump to that.
This is one of our larger funds.
So I guess my question is, I couldn't figure out, and maybe it's in here and I just couldn't find it, all the donations that came in last year for the Altogether Playground, which was a significant amount. I was expecting that to come in under the City of Orem Foundation because of like the way it got routed when you got your receipt and everything, but maybe that got put somewhere else, so I just couldn't figure out where that was supposed to be.
It was all just run through the general fund.
Okay.
Now, some of it did end up in the current fiscal year, did run through the Orem Foundation Trust, but only those if they specifically identified it as such. So there's a possibility that it was just deposited and run through the general fund, even though it was part of the Orem Foundation Trust.
Okay.
So.
Gotcha. Next one is on 196, and I apologize. I'm not sure if this is lining up with the print copy page number or if I mixed it up with the PDF version, but the next question was just on the enterprise funds, and this I think could be a more involved discussion, but I think my concern with the way that we currently notify the public about our enterprise fund transfers, if we had the information that was in the first few slides that you presented today, I think that would be phenomenal. And I think this really helps people get the big picture as far as why we do that, how we do that. But when we have the legal notices that go out with our utility bills, I feel that often leads to more confusion than clarity. And I'm wondering if we can try to take kind of this level of information and incorporate it directly into our budget document, as well as, maybe if we have that legal requirement, we need to send this information out to the public, but maybe on the other side, we have a more plain language explanation of what's happening and why it's happening.
So if I may, I think that was the intent this year, was to provide, there are certain things that we have to include in the notice, but we had talked about providing, like you said, a flip side that would, in more layman's terms, define what we're doing. So I think that's the intent of what we're going to do this year in relation to this. And we actually have, the notices have to be mailed out at a specific time. So I think we have adequate time to prepare those notices and to send them out, to provide that information, both the statutorily required language as well as the everyday.
The language as a whole is going to change due to that new law.
Yep. So on page 196, where we provide an overview, I'm not sure we'd be able to provide a full description on that one-page summary for every single transfer that's happening, but like if we could have this level of information incorporated in there, just so that it's there, it's codified in the actual document, so that we're not having to scramble like, oh, well, didn't you get that email we sent 9 months ago, and they have to try to find that. So
you bet. I'll see what I can kind of incorporate into there.
And then just kind of a general concern that I know that we're taking a more in-depth look at our general fee structure and how do we compare with other cities or other programs. Just one anecdotal concern that was brought to me not too long ago. A gentleman was selling a little strip of property, and I can't remember if it was a fence where the fence was in the wrong spot and they were trying to clarify that. But anyway, there's just this one little strip in between these two lots that they were trying to sort out. And they were selling the strip for $2,000. It wasn't a very large piece of property. But to get all of the approvals they needed to go and jump through the hoops of the city, the fees were just over $2,000. And so he actually ended up paying the city in order to give this land to this other property owner. And I'm just wondering, as part of that review of our fee structure, is there any way we can look at the value of the property that's under consideration to say, I know that there's time that it takes our city staff to review something and make sure that it crosses all the T's and dots all the I's, but if you're doing that for a $2,000 strip of property versus a $200,000 or $2 million lot, I think there needs to be some consideration for situations like that.
If I may, too, I think some of this, I mean, we can do whatever you deem appropriate as a city council, but in many cases, the work required on a $2,000 issue is literally the same as something required on a $25,000 issue. The legal noticing, advertising requirements are the same for $2,000 versus $25,000. And so I think there are some things that, when we look at the fees, we're looking at the true costs of the service that staff, mailing, public notice requirements in newspapers, so on and so forth. Those are things, like I said, that are going to be the same regardless of the amount of whatever the circumstance is. The mailing requirement, for example, a forever stamp is the same cost whether you're mailing a $2,000 notice or a $25,000 notice. So I think we've tried to be understanding of some of those situations. If there are particular concerns that the gentleman has, I know our Development Services Department would be happy to sit down with them and go through those particular concerns. And if there are ways for us to trim some costs, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't.
And I'm not sure if one possibility might be there were certain things that we needed to check, that if it took $1,000 to check engineering on something where maybe engineering didn't need to be done on something. I'm not familiar with all the specifics of that specific case, but I just feel like there needs to be some level of common sense built into that, where I'm not sure if we could cap it on, if you're selling property worth this much, the fees can't be more than 50% of that.
And I can appreciate that, but sometimes too, what's being represented to you is not necessarily a fair reflection of actually what's required.
And I would hate to get into a subjective situation where we're making judgments about various transactions, and then all of a sudden we're playing favorites and so forth. So, I think you have to have a level of continuity that this is the charge. Whatever you're doing, this is the charge that takes place. So, anything else?
Thanks.
Okay, so this is a public hearing. We'd like to open it up to the public and see if there are any comments. Anyone who'd like to make a comment, hold their comments to 3 minutes and give us their name. Seeing that everybody is left and there's no one to make a comment, we'll bring it back to the council. Any further comment from the council? Richard, are you satisfied with making all the comments you want to make? I mean, I think we're satisfied that we don't want to go through every fee. I believe those that wanted to read it have read it. I think most of us have.
I find that you didn't want to go over every fee very satisfying.
Okay. So just to let you know, I did go through every fee, but I didn't want to have to do it tonight, so I decided to do it ahead of time. Okay, so if there is no further comment, I would like to go ahead and make a motion. I would like to move that the City Council by resolution adopt the fiscal year 2017-18 tentative budget, and then adopt the final budget on June 13, 2017 at 6 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer.
Aye.
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 Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you very much, Brandon and Richard. As always, we appreciate your service. So we would now like to move on. Any communication items from the city manager? Okay, so I would accept a movement to adjourn this meeting to move to a meeting of the redevelopment agency of the city of Orem. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, so we are now calling to order a redevelopment agency of the city of Orem meeting. We have no approval of minutes. There are no minutes to approve. Our first item is a public hearing to adopt the tentative budget of the RDA for fiscal year 2017-18. And Richard and Brandon are our presenters.
Thank you, Mayor. So the budget that we are going to be going over with the redevelopment agency has not changed a lot from prior years, primarily because all but one of the project areas has completed as far as its regular tax increment is concerned. And the only thing left are the haircut to pay for the debt that was associated with the projects of those RDAs. So that's the primary things that are left, and obviously that gradually is going to diminish as well. As you can see, we are gradually, the revenues, as I mentioned, are gradually decreasing each year as those project areas continue to go down and their percentages had dropped. As mentioned in here, Project 9008 is the remaining tax where we are receiving regular tax increment. This is a listing of the existing tax increments, or project areas, sorry, and the expected expenses and the corresponding expectations for the receipts on those areas. We have identified certain projects that to be used in certain of those areas, and as those projects come forward, then the monies from that particular project area are used to complete those projects. This is a listing of the related outstanding bonded debt that those they're called haircuts, from the RDA that pay for that debt. As you can see, that debt completes in fiscal year 2023. One item of note that you may be aware, obviously, is the CDA that was created with the University Mall. You may be wondering why that's not on there. That CDA does not go into effect until fiscal year 19. So when we're here next year, you'll start seeing some information in relation to that project area. And is there any questions in relation to the stuff in the RDA?
I have a question.
Okay, Councilmember Luray.
The Ken Garf agreement with the new Honda, is that in one of these projects?
So that has actually been paid out of the current fiscal year. So funds that already existed were used to pay for those two, the two Ken Garf incentive agreement. And so they're not part of this budget because, like I mentioned, they're in the current fiscal year.
And they won't be going forward, they were paid?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
One time.
Okay. If there's no further comments, this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to come forward is welcome to do so. Keep your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name. Seeing that there's no one coming forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Bring it back to the council. Any further comments from the council? Okay. Anyone like to make a motion? Okay, I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we adopt the fiscal year 2017-18 tentative budget and set a public hearing to adopt the final budget on June 13th, 2017 at 6:10 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer.
Aye.
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 Okay, the resolution passes. Anyone wishing to make a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Okay, and this is adjournment to a meeting of the Special Service Lighting District of Orem. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we are calling to order the Special Service Lighting District of the City of Orem. First matter of business is to approve the minutes of the Special Service Lighting District meeting of June 14, 2016. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we'll go to our scheduled items. This is to tentatively adopt the Street Lighting Special Service District tentative budget for this agency for the City of Orem fiscal year 2017-18, and to adopt the final budget on June 13th, 2017 at 6:20 p.m. And our presenters are Richard and Brandon.
Thanks again. Primarily, there are no differences between, I say no differences, $90,000 increase, primarily related to the contributions required because of the franchise tax that's related to the street lighting, and all other things related to the street lighting fund are basically the same as the prior year. I was going to now turn the time over to Richard to discuss the future elements related to the street lighting fee and how that impacts the street lighting fund.
Okay, the street lighting was paid for by a bond, and the last payment will be made in March of 2018. When it was set up, every household was to pay for 17 years, the $325 a month. And the $325 came on as street lights were turned on in various areas of the city. Started over in the Cherry Hill area, and it was done in an order that was based upon the existing crime rates per neighborhood, and we stuck to that order. So, if you looked at it, we bounced all over the place. And now, not that if you live in Cherry Hill, you think you're in a crime-ridden area. Happens to front University Parkway, where there's a lot of shoplifting. So it's not that the neighborhood's dangerous, but the crime rate was highest there, and that's why it went there. So that fee will continue on until April of 2019. Then we'll start to come off various neighborhoods, and it ramps down until July of 2022. So it has a few years it takes to go down. In that few years, we'll still be collecting $325 from a increasingly smaller sounds, that's an oxymoron, ever smaller group of customers. And until that July 2022, it's like $3,000. Then it's over. And we will have honored the commitment we made. If you wanted that $325 to continue for another purpose, you would have to take proactive action to do that. Now, originally what was desired in the interim between when the bond payment stopped and the revenue collection stopped, there are some infill areas with streetlights, like if you go over by Orem High School in the neighborhoods between 4th and State, they have the old silver poles from the old lighting districts, replacing those with the Orem lights. And there's a number of areas around the city like that. And if there were some, what's the term we use, like Northridge Housing or Cherry Tree, where they have their own private roads, if they wanted the streetlights, then they could pay to have them installed, and we would do it in that interim.
So, question for you: outside of a private neighborhood wanting it, just the city in general, could you get the information for us on what areas we may have skipped over, and if those things are necessary? So I'm familiar with the neighborhood that you're talking about, the streetlights south of here, and they're a different street light. They're a kind of street light you'd put over, say, State Street.
Yeah, the big silver poles. Anywhere you see those, that's
right. Big silver poles, and they drape over. They look much different than the green Washington-style light that we have. But they are effective. I mean, they do the job. Now, I know I've spoken to one of the neighbors who complained that she said we should have gotten the Washington-type lights instead of this. But at the same time, they are lighting up the street and doing the job.
Yes, and they had those lights long before the rest of the city had the Washington style.
So I'd just be interested to know, are there neighborhoods in the city that have no street lights, that are not private neighborhoods, that have not been addressed?
There are some areas along Geneva Road, and Carterville, as a matter of policy, did not receive street lighting.
And they don't want it, it's my understanding.
Yeah, and the designation is rural something.
Yeah, I mean,
it was going to stay that way.
I think they would be upset if you were to put streetlights there, the people that I know anyway.
And outside of that, of those two areas and the special lighting areas that existed, and they're just pocketed throughout the city.
But could you just get us an estimate of what that is and how many and what it would cost?
Yeah.
Just so we know. Okay.
We already have that.
Okay.
We just have to send you the file.
Okay. Then, Richard, anything else with regards to the?
No, it's it's pretty standardized.
Okay. So this is a public hearing, and we will open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to make a comment, please hold your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name. No, we had one stand up, but he changed his mind. Okay, seeing that no one's coming forward, we'll close the public hearing portion of this item and bring it back to the council. Any comments from the council?
Ready to make
Okay. Okay, Sam?
I think Preston's had a long enough day here. I move that we tentatively adopt the fiscal year 2017-2018 tentative budget and set a public hearing to adopt the final budget on June 13, 2017 at 6:20 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer?
Aye.
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 Okay, with that said, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'd just like to thank Preston for being here for the full day, and congratulations. Preston, if you'd want to come up here for a minute, I want to put you in my seat so you can get a picture with your mom.
He was worth the wait.
Thank you, Richard and Brandon.
Has he been with you all day?
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to write love you.
God, love you.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you first.
Turn around.
Dang
Sit
it.
up straight.
Yep, sit up straight so I can see you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to get our picture? Come on. Oh, Debbie, she dogged it.
Steve, love you too.
Nope.
Okay, honey. Tell me how you really feel. One, two.
Hey, Brent.
Awesome.
So let's go down to my office. We'll take one more and then we're done.
If you take one.